Practice.
Okay, as we have delay. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome everyone to the Ad Hoc Sustainability and Resilience Committee meeting. It's January 8th, 6:31, officially calling this meeting to order. With us are council members Goldstein, Najolski-Eichner, Dunn, and myself, obviously, so we have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is acceptance of the minutes from, I think it's November 13th. Can I have a motion? Motion. Thank you, Councilmember Najolski-Eichner. Any modifications, omissions, changes, deletions, anything at all? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, all in favor of acceptance of the minutes? Great, thank you, that passes. Next is public participation. Katie, do we have anyone in the public that would like to participate?
There are two people with their hands raised.
Okay, great. As a reminder, please, you have 3 minutes. Please state your full name, address, and stick to the topic on the agenda. Thank you.
First, we have Alex M.
Cool. Welcome, Alex.
You,
Alex, yep, there you go. We can hear you.
thanks so much. My name is Alex Muniz. I'm here on Mallard Road in Norwalk, born and raised. Just quick question. I've had been hearing and reading about the town's sustainability initiative in regards to composting specifically, which I think is pretty important these days considering Norwalk's peculiar kind of growth. I've read that the town's looking for a sustainability director. Would that person be handling composting opportunities, or is there a team in place that can do so? And will they be working to involve the school systems, or at least the next generations of Norwalk?
Great. Thank you, Alex.
Sure.
Anyone else, Katie?
Yes, sorry, yes. There is Kelly Humiston.
Welcome, Kelly. You are muted.
Oh, yes. Hi. Thank you. Kelly Humiston on Wolf Pit Avenue in Norwalk. And I read a while ago that the mayor wants us to be the greenest city in Connecticut, which is really cool. And I'm totally on board with that. I'm just wondering how we're going to handle that on like a commercial and a residential level. Do you have any insight into that?
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, Kelly.
That's it. No other
That's it.
members from the public.
Excellent. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on. So we have now our presentation by
My
Tim
apologies.
O'Connor.
Someone just popped their hand up.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yep. Mrs. Loricella.
Sure.
Thank you. Good evening, Johan as chair and members, and Tim. We're in a group together about composting. Anyway, for the record, my name is Diane Loricella. I wasn't going to speak because I do want to listen to what Tim and others might say about this topic. However, Johan, I wanted you to know that there are people in my ad hoc Norwalk Zero Waste Coalition who are nearly professional about food scrap recycling as well as leaves. And for this city to become a truly the greenest city at which we're striving for, we're not there yet, of course. I think, and I once again request that this committee reach out to its citizens that care about this topic in a meaningful way, not just for a 3-minute discussion. So I offer to you something that I had done with George when he was the Public Works Committee chair and other Public Works Committee chairs prior to this ad hoc group being formed, and that is an overview of reducing our trash and pulling out things that are valuable, including things that make valuable soil. What I would also like this committee to consider, and the consultant who's from out of town that doesn't know about my and other people's decades-long dedication to this topic, is that as we are developing a new contract about collection of food scraps, it would be very good if the public who pays for the transport of food scraps and leaves to get back at least one bucket load or bag of rich soil. Many towns do this. It's part of the contract with the haulers and the facilities that actually process the material. And that has been missing for many, many years. I think that would make for a very good exchange, getting back our value of what we invest as citizens, residents rather, and businesses. Lastly, I just wanted again to lift up what someone before me said about beginning to integrate the school system. I currently am a member of one of the Food Rescue US rescuers of one of the schools, and I have reached out to the school because not only should we not waste food that is edible, but also the scraps should be put back into a composting facility. So with that, I look forward to listening. And again, Mr. Lopez, it would be very good for you to reach out to me and my ad hoc Norwalk Zero Waste Coalition in the near future. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lorachella. If you want, go ahead and shoot me an email right away. And so, yeah, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation discuss. So thank you so much. Okay, with that said, Tim, I will turn it over to you for the presentation. Thank you so much, Tim, I met Tim in Westport at a sustainability event, and so I look forward to hear what he has to say and some of his work in this space. So, Tim, I will turn it over to you.
Can you see my screen okay? I'm sharing it now.
Yep, we can see it.
All right, good. All right, well, thank you for inviting me to speak with you guys. I'm always eager to share what we've learned working with Bridgeport and now Stratford, and in general with other nonprofits and organizations around Fairfield County and the state. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I gotta skip this. There we go. All right. So first question, what is composting? Just cover quickly the basics. It's managed, it's controlled aerobic decomposition. The hard work's all done by bacteria, microorganisms. Humans mostly do the work of collect, mix, and remix, or use other technology to make sure there's constant air in the piles so that they decompose. Park City Compost, we use mechanical mixing because just the nature of our current site and operation. 4 ingredients of compost are carbon sources. So wood chips, straw, leaves, cardboard, even trimmings from your pot growing operations. Those items provide structure to the pile and also organic material for bacteria to work on, but most of it's structure for air pockets and for bacteria to have something to hang on to. Nitrogen comes from food scraps, grass clippings, even the air. Water, of course, most often the water in the food scraps is enough, but sometimes you do have to add more in the hot, dry summers. And air is a constant requirement to keep the piles aerobic. If a pile is kept aerobic properly, there will be no smell. It smells like dirt, truly does. I mean, it's fun to do demonstrations with people who are hesitant or ignorant or whatever, to show them you can take some very smelly food scraps that you've collected or let rot just to demonstrate it. You mix it with the wood chips and leaves. You mix it a little bit of regular compost already in it to kind of inoculate it, and immediately it smells like dirt. It no longer smells like rotten food. It's kind of fun that way. The benefit of composting is you're getting. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on. You're getting rid of the food scraps, obviously, and reducing the impact through the incinerator and through landfill in those areas where Connecticut's back into doing landfill, just not in Connecticut. It's all going to Pennsylvania, Ohio, everywhere but our own responsible backyard, so to speak. Which reducing the incineration of food scraps is a really big deal because the Fairfield County I-95 corridor is a major hotspot for nitrous oxides. Most of it is from exhaust, but it's also from the incinerator. So obviously Bridgeport gets a triple whammy between Route 8, 95, and the incinerator, which nitrous oxides are a major trigger for asthma. And asthma is a major cause for student absenteeism in school. So it all just keeps cascading. And I know Bridgeport, I don't know about Norwalk, but I know Bridgeport is a hot spot for asthma, and it's a major issue. The other side effect of composting is we get this organic material at the end after we cure and sift the compost that is wonderfully beneficial for soil. It's like a probiotic for the soil. It isn't just like adding fertilizer to soil. It's adding life back into the soil, so it becomes self-sustaining if you don't kill it by putting chemicals back on it. It does wonderful things. There are people who have done studies about using compost for remediation. I'm not making any claims around remediation. All I'm saying is it restores healthy soils. One other thing you can include, I know Stratford, who we're working with, does not compost the leaves. They have to pay to have them shipped away. I'm understanding Norwalk also has to pay to ship them away. One advantage of having a compost operation is you can, instead of paying to ship those away, you compost them with the food scraps, kill two birds with one stone. And one other thing that is another wasted product is with a single stream recycling, a lot of the corrugated that's collected, and if you think about since the pandemic, all the Amazon boxes have tripled. When the corrugated is contaminated, it can't be recycled. The recyclers reject it. If it's wet, because they think you're cranking the weight, or if it's got oil from the pizza box, whatever, they reject it. So where does it go? It goes in the incinerator. If you shred that corrugated, it's a really good carbon source for composting. So again, it's killing multiple birds with one stone. Not that we want to kill birds, but you know what I mean. Important to keep in mind is I think Diane mentioned around feeding people first, and Johan, you did too. The EPA finally relooked at everything and said, well, what do we do about food waste? Because it's a huge issue from a big picture standpoint in the entire world, and in particular United States. Well, first thing you do is reduce it at the source. So you try and change processes to reduce it. Yes.
Tim, if I may, actually, what's actually a sad fact, is that I think the U.S. it's either the largest or one of the largest generators of food waste. I think it's something along the lines of like 30 to 40% of his entire food supply. And I mean, some of this is inefficiencies in the entire food processing system, but a lot of it is because of us. And in the really interesting paradox is that despite the increase in the price for groceries, this is still a fact, right?
Right.
This amount of waste is being reduced.
Involved, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but go ahead. Just
No, you're right. No, and that's so the first thing to do is reduce the process-based causes of food waste, which is more in the supply chain. It also is the marketing. Why are you promoting somebody to buy 5 peppers when they're only going to eat 1 before they rot, especially if they stop and shop. But the next thing to do is the food rescue, feed the people who would not otherwise be able to do that. And just yesterday, Food Rescue USA, which is the one that works in Norwalk, announced that they had achieved a 10 million pound milestone of diversion of food from waste to humans, which is a pretty substantial quantity. Obviously, get it out of the landfill, which is important. Feed animals, which is a very good use. Cows will eat most food scraps if you convert it into pellets and stuff like that. There is a company in Bridgeport that does some of that. Problem is, there's not a lot of market not in Bridgeport, I'm sorry, in Connecticut. There's not a lot of market in Connecticut for animal food because most of the farms have been chased away. But that is again, it's a priority usage. Then you work your way down. Composting is one of the last things, and it's still extremely beneficial. It sequesters 65% of the original carbon. As I already said, it improves soil health. The other thing is when they incinerate food scraps, and incineration is still like 85% of what happens in Connecticut. They have to use natural gas to keep the temperature high enough to like literally burn this stuff off. So you're not only burning and creating nitrous oxides from burning the food scraps, you're creating a lot more nitrous oxides from burning the natural gas. It's dumb all around. Sorry if anybody's offended, but it is. So next, around composting, I don't want people to think that because I favor community composting, municipal composting, that I don't support backyard composting, but there are some substantial differences for backyard versus municipal and other scaled operations. A scaled operation is going to be hot. Our piles are well over 130 degrees. Frequently they're 160 degrees. Even in this cold temperature today, we did our mixing today, the pile was 125 degrees. It's important, the temperature over 130 for 4 days is required to kill the weed seeds, the tomato seeds, which people might not consider are weeds, but boy, they get through the system, and also the pathogenic bacteria. Keeping tarps on top of piles, which most backyard composters don't do, helps keep birds and people out of the pile to reduce contamination. The other aspect with composting is there's a lot of myths and disinformation out there driven by NIMBY. As I said before, smells. A well-managed composting, aerobic composting operation will not smell once everything's mixed. The other thing is a properly managed hot composting system, like a scaled municipal or community operation, is too hot for vermin. No rats. I mean, we're operating a small operation over at Captain's Cove. If anybody's ever been over to Captain's Cove and you look underneath the dock, there are huge wharf rats that live there, but they don't come into our pile because it's too hot. Literally, it's too hot. It's not habitable for them. And we've been operating there now for 4 years and have had absolutely no complaints from the restaurant or anything else for smells and or other issues like that. Now there's other ways of composting. There's vermicomposting, using worms to do the work. There's in-vessel systems. I know Stanford's testing a few of those. Those are more capital oriented. They're attempts to reduce human involvement by just making a little mini factory, basically. There's also something called anaerobic digesters. Those are ideal for composting sewage and manure. They're not ideal for composting food scraps because basically, while you can extract some of the energy out of it as a waste energy process, at the back end of the anaerobic digester, you've got a liquid waste, which is highly regulated. There's some states that allow you to dump it on land, but the reality is that's not necessarily a smart thing to do. And then you also have a physical waste, digestate, that has to be composted. So it's kind of ironic. After it goes through the anaerobic process, it has to be composted aerobically in order to kill all the pathogenic bacteria and reduce the smells. The other thing about anaerobic digesters and food composting in general, a lot of people have heard about PFAS and other forever chemicals. They're everywhere. And there's a background level of PFAS chemicals everywhere, including each one of us in our bodies. So any regulations anybody wants to throw out about regulating PFAS, they really need to focus on eliminating additional burdens on the world, not necessarily banning the existence of anything with PFAS, because you do that, you're banning us. I mean, technically, everybody would have to be cremated because our bodies are full of it. So that's another aspect of it. In terms of where do you source food scraps, you have a residential versus commercial issue, obviously. Residential is huge behavior change. Commercial, the restaurants, institutions, retailers, they have behavior change, but because of their scale, there's more they can do. But at the same time, it is a change in process for it. Now, there are some economic things that we still have to figure out in terms of if, let's say you take a school, and I know Norwalk's talking about that. If you take all the trash that the school's been collecting over the past 5 years, and then say, well, what happens if we separate the food scraps? What's the remaining tonnage? So there's a separation there that you're going to save money on the food scraps. And usually for schools, it's a lot because the cafeteria is a big generator of trash, heavy generator. But the other side of it is that the service costs for picking up the non-food scrap waste could go way down because suddenly you don't have to pick up every 3 to 5 days, every week, whatever it is, because there's no rotting food in there. So the dry paper-based, plastic-based trash could sit there for 2 weeks until the dumpster's full. You know, and a lot of these dumpsters now are automated. They can tell when they're full. And they basically call for pickup. These are all things that there's still a lot of learning going on. The haulers are not necessarily sharing all their learning because they want to be able to make money regardless. Another issue we have.
Real quick, sorry, Tim, if I may, actually, just for everyone to know that the school system in Norwalk,
Yeah.
They're conducting pilots in 3 to 4 schools. I mean, they're trying to revamp their composting program. So I'm just kind of want to let the public know that they're looking into revamping.
Are they composting or are they just separating food scraps?
I think they're starting off with separating.
Right. Okay.
Right. Yeah. But I'm sorry. Yeah. Go ahead. I just wanted to make that point.
No, it's very valid. One other issue you have, obviously, especially with residential, but it's also true with commercial, is just plain compliance. Connecticut doesn't invest much money in DEEP to do any enforcement of the regulations. It's kind of all voluntary enforcement. I don't know what Norwalk's level of recycling is. I know Bridgeport's is pathetic. It's barely 50%. So getting food scraps better is going to take time as well. I've already mentioned the whole idea of a higher scaled operation is helpful. It obviously gets into different issues for permitting and zoning, planning and zoning and DEEP. You don't. While I fully believe that you could put a well-managed compost operation almost anywhere, including on a schoolyard, not everybody understands and believes that. So there's learning, and even DEEP has a 200-foot setback from any residential property for a composting operation, which I've challenged them on that. Of well, what if there's a railroad embankment between the residential and the compost? What's the risk there? I can't get a response, but obviously there's capital issues as well. I mean, we pursue what I would call more of a farming type operation of composting. There are higher tech vessels and higher tech ways of doing it. There's a large, very well designed, very well engineered composting operation being put in place in Preston, Connecticut, which is on the eastern side. Now they're on a river, so they have coastal issues, but it's also being done by the local municipal sanitary group, and they've got a highly engineered process that's going to use forced air instead of mixing, and it should be a very good demonstration, but it's also higher cost. Scale does help. It reduces the people costs. We're firm believers in Park City Compost about living wages and benefits, but also, equipment and supply, insurance is huge, all those things. And the revenue to pay for that, tipping fees for most Fairfield County went up to like $88 a ton for trash into the incinerator. The tipping fee for food scraps delivered up to the Southington biodigester is about $70 a ton. It's just a little under that. And similarly for the New Milford Farms. Challenge is you're going to pay a lot of money to ship it all the way up there. But where the tipping fees can settle out is a question. But you can also collect tipping fees for leaves and chips because a lot of those organizations that collect those are having to pay anywhere from $25 to $45 a ton to drop it off somewhere. You can sell the finished compost. It can be a nuisance, coordinating people to do pickup. I'd rather do delivery, but I still want to do bulk because having to bag and coordinate a retail operation is just beyond my time availability as a very small organization. As I said before, finished compost, well done, doesn't have any pathogens as long as it's been covered for birds. And again, you've got this whole background level of PFAS. Compost probably has a background level of PFAS. I'd have a hard time believing it wouldn't, unless somehow or other the bacteria eat it up. There was some legislators, well-intentioned in New York State, that were trying to ban any use of products with PFAS, and luckily a few of the composters, including municipal, had to wave their hand and said, "Excuse me, where do you want us to give you our compost then?" Because we wouldn't be able to distribute it or give it to people to use. And even if it has background levels of PFAS, it still offers a lot more benefit to the soil. So I wanted to keep this very short because I really was hoping to just answer questions that you might have in terms of things you've heard or concerns you have, ideas you have, whatever, because I'm open to sharing that.
Sure, Tim, thank you so much. I know we were pressed for time because we have other meetings at 7 o'clock, but this was perfect. If any other members have questions, feel free to. I'll start off by asking. I know that there is new legislation that went into effect this year,
Yes.
meaning that now any commercial entity that produces, I think it's at least 20 tons of
26 tons.
waste, organic waste, or 26 tons of organic waste. How do you envision that actually being monitored or even
Well,
enforced?
the state has not done a wonderful job of communicating that out to any other than the major grocers. So, and most of the grocery stores have already been, had been tapped on the shoulder for the whole food rescue by the food rescue companies, because they, either because it's part of their sustainability mission, particularly like Stop and Shop being owned by a Dutch company, they know that stuff real well. So the grocery stores will do a lot, but at the same time they probably generate a lot as well. So that's a matter of working with the commercial haulers to, invest in new systems so they can collect the food scraps separately from the trash and bring it to the local composting operation. Now, one of the things that law did was it eliminated, it used to be there's a 20-mile circle that you had to be within 20 miles of an operating composting operation. And that recent rule that went into effect January 1 eliminated that mileage loophole, because the issue is where it's easiest to set up composting operations way upstate in the middle of nowhere, even though it's a hauling issue and a trucking issue, people who are starting those things weren't getting any demand because, the 20-mile limit said nobody had to do it. So that's the biggie. In terms of restaurants and stuff like that, I think 90% of the ones I've talked to are not even aware of this rule change. So there's a lot to happen. It's going to take a while. Now, the state, starting in March, the state is committed that it's going to be available. There's going to be a website where anybody who's been identified as a generator of 26 tons or more will have to self-report what they're doing and where they're sending their food scraps to. There is an ability within DEEP for this time for enforcement, financial enforcement and regulatory enforcement, which is not common, but they still don't have people to do much, which is one reason why they're digitizing it. Hopefully it'll trigger a lot of increased availability of food scraps for composting, because that might get more municipalities off the dime.
Absolutely.
Bridgeport's
Yep.
been a challenge, but you guys are interested. We are talking with Stratford. They're very interested. So things will start moving hopefully in 25.
Excellent. Thanks, Tim. Councilmember Najolski.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much, Tim. This was super helpful presentation. Can you talk a little bit about the size of your current operation? So, we have, I think, a lot of theoretical desire to do this here and support. The pushback that we've gotten has largely been about finding a parcel where we could do it. So could you talk a little bit about the acreage you have, where it's located, how you've managed this question about sort of barriers or required distance from residences, et cetera? Just the physical layout would be super helpful to understand.
So we currently operate at Captain's Cove in Bridgeport. So it's entirely paved. I don't think any of us want to know what's underneath that pavement because I can assure you it's full of PCBs because there used to be an incinerator there. We only take up 8 parking spaces.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Wow.
And we have a tractor. We have these big concrete blocks that are for push walls and stuff like that. And we manage it actively. Now we only process about 24 tons a year, but it's a start. Mm-hmm. We do a collection in Black Rock. We have over 100 households that participate every week. So, I mean, it's a start. In terms of.
And just, sorry, did you say that you are incorporating scraps from your municipal, why am I blanking on the word? Your, yard clippings and your municipal collection of sort of tree trimmings and yard clippings and stuff? Is that part of your process?
We could use leaves, and we have used leaves in the past. It's a long story. We were scheduled, had Bridgeport permission, all the planning and zoning all done to move to a piece of land behind Captain's Cove. And we were in the process of doing the permitting with DEEP. And somebody from the back of the room said, I think there's something wrong with that property. And I said, if you know something we don't know, please let us know. Well, he dug it out. It was 4 times the level at which federal EPA will not let you on the property for CBs. So we left our leaf pile there and we don't use it. And
Totally
we don't have room where we are for leaves. So we do use wood chips. Okay. Mostly wood chips. And if you're using wood chips, then, we'll bring in bags of leaves once in a while. But if you're using wood chips, basically the only challenge with wood chips versus including leaves is leaves are highly inoculated already with bacteria and yeast and stuff like that from being out on the street and on the trees. With wood chips, we have to just add a little of the old compost back in. That's all. Then it cooks well. In terms of finding sites, I mean, you want a site with that either has or that you can put in place a hard surface because you're using tractors to scrape and mix. And you've got this 200-foot setback. Although if you already, one of the things we're working with Stratford for is they want to do it at their transfer station. So we're working with them to either slice off a corner of their transfer station and say it's not, this isn't transfer station anymore, it's now leaf composting. Or whatever they have to do to get the state to agree it's okay. Because technically from the state standpoint, you can't compost at a transfer facility. It's just. Yeah. Okay. But obviously if you can go to a location that already has permits like that, then the neighbors can't necessarily complain as much. But you do, ideally you'd want an acre of space to handle, a decent sized composting operation. And you could do a lot for the entire city of Norwalk with an acre. It doesn't have to be expensive. I mean, our operations are all using big, huge concrete blocks, tractors. That's all you really need. You can go with an engineered solution like they're doing in Preston. And if I had the money and capital, I might consider it, but it's not the easiest solution. The easiest solution is to keep it simple and mechanically mix everything and be involved and on top of it that way.
No, that's super helpful. And I hadn't really thought about the hard surface. That's an interesting component of it. Have you all considered or investigated using, I think you had mentioned you'd investigate a little bit using a corner of a school property, or have you investigated using a remote corner of a park property? Like, are these conversations that you guys have had about in Bridgeport
Well,
or with Stratford or with anyone else? I'm just curious where else people are sort of doing this.
yeah, there's only two places in Bridgeport where you could compost in a park. You could do it down at Seaside, but then nobody wants to give away any part of Seaside, and it does have coastal issues. And you could do it up at Beardsley, but that, because the zoo is very interested in doing it with us because they have a bunch of, do it in parallel, but they'd love to compost the anything from the vegetarian animals, not the mammals. But the you still have the issue of having residential within a certain distance to work around. And I've done a whole lot of that. Google Maps has a measure tool, and I've done a lot of that. You draw a circle, and finding a spot that works is very difficult. And the other challenge, in Bridgeport, and I'm sure Norwalk's got the same thing, is there's not an open piece of land in Bridgeport, except maybe some of the parks, and except the Harding High School football field, the old one, that are not full of toxins, because that's part of the history and heritage of our cities.
Sure.
Yeah, we were trying to use Harding High Schools for a while on a temporary basis, and the community just didn't want it. They were hoping to get senior housing in there, and instead it's going to go be part of Bridgeport Hospital. But yeah, we did our research on that, and that had always been open space.
Interesting. Okay. Well, this is incredibly helpful. Thank you. Because I think just these mechanics have been a big challenge. So this is incredibly helpful information. Thank you very much.
Well, if you get to it, I have other work I've done as part of our site planning that I could share with you later offline, in terms of the criteria and the thinking in terms of site evaluation.
Yeah, I think that would be very, very helpful. I know our Department of Public Works, we've had multiple conversations about this, and I think it would be very helpful for them to hear more about how you've successfully sort of located sites. So I'd love to talk more about that.
Great. Thank you so much, council member. And Tim, thanks a lot for the answer. Now, I guess since we're pressed for time, we have to jump into another meeting. That concludes our meeting. But one last thing, Brian, are you still there?
He's not muted.
No, okay, that's fine. No, for those that called and asked about the sustainability work that's ongoing, feel free to reach out to me via email, and I will get you a well-articulated response in terms of what the plans are going forward. Just want to let the commentators know that for sure. But that is something that's in the works, and we're very excited about it. And so, yeah, feel free. Just go ahead and email me. So to conclude, Tim, thank you so much again for presentation, short and sweet, and excellent. We'll continue the conversation, and I'll reach out so you can provide some of the material that you have, so I can share with the rest of the council members. So I'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much, Tim, and thank you all to the council members. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Good night.
So moved.
Thank you. There you go. Thanks so much, council. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Bye.